Night fell on Velris like a curtain dropping over a stage. The temperature plunged. The air turned thin and sharp. The orange glow of fires dimmed to a dull red, and the sky above went black. No moon, no stars, just a thick blanket of smoke and dust that swallowed every trace of light. For the aliens inside the outpost, night was a time of fear. The Drawl did not sleep. They kept moving, kept digging, kept pressing against the walls like a tide that never pulled back. The civilians huddled in the central block, wrapped in thermal blankets, listening to the sound of claws scraping against metal somewhere below them. The Vessi guards stood at their posts, with weapons they barely knew how to use, staring into darkness their eyes could not pierce. But the humans were not afraid of the dark. In the security wing, Captain Han Doyun stood before his squad for the last time before they moved out. They were armed and ready. Every rebreather had been tested. Every piece of gear was secured tight so nothing would rattle or shift during movement. Silence was survival tonight. "Teams of 3, Doyun said. He kept his voice low, not because anyone outside could hear, but because the quiet set the tone. "Alpha Team, Jiun, Minho, Hajin, you take the eastern flank. 2 hive leaders confirmed in sectors 4 and 6. Beta Team, Taeho, Unji, Sunwoo, you push through the southern corridor and hit the leader in sector 9. Gamma Team, Soren, Daewon, Nari, you stay elevated. Soren, you have overwatch. Pick your targets. The rest of you, move with me through the center." Nobody asked questions. They had done this before. Not here, not on this planet, not against these creatures, but the mechanics were the same. Move quiet, strike fast, do not stop. Doyun looked at each of them one last time. "We do not leave anyone behind. No matter what happens out there, we come home together." 12 heads nodded. They left through a service hatch on the western wall, a narrow maintenance tunnel that opened into the ruins of a collapsed storage building. The air hit them immediately. Cold, thin, wrong. Their rebreathing hummed softly, feeding them filtered oxygen in controlled bursts. They had 40 minutes of clean air per cycle. After that, they would have to swap canisters or breathe the local atmosphere, which would give them maybe 10 more minutes before their lungs started to burn. The darkness outside was total. No ambient light, no reflections. The humans activated their night vision gear, and the world turned into shades of gray and green. To them, the landscape was visible. Broken walls, scattered debris, the distant shapes of Drawl drones moving in slow, swaying patterns across the ground. To any alien watching, the humans had just walked into a black void and vanished. Jiun's team moved first. They slipped along the eastern wall like shadows, stepping carefully over rubble and broken metal. Jiun led from the front, her rifle up, her breathing controlled. Behind her, Corporal Yoon Minho moved with the quiet grace of someone who had grown up hunting in the mountains of Gangwon Province. Private Shin Hajin brought up the rear, watching their backs with wide, steady eyes. They reached the edge of Sector 4 in 11 minutes. The hive leader was there, a massive Drawl variant, twice the size of the drones, its body pulsing with low vibrations that Jiun could feel through the soles of her boots. It was surrounded by hundreds of drones, all pressed close to it like iron filings around a magnet. The vibrations were commands. Move here, dig there, attack this wall. Jiun held up a fist. Her team stopped. She studied the formation, counted the drones, measured the distance. Then she pointed to Minho and made a small circular gesture with 2 fingers. Minho nodded, pulled a concussion grenade from his vest, and waited. Ji-yun counted down on her fingers. 3, 2, 1. Minho threw the grenade. It arced through the dark and landed 6 meters from the hive leader. The explosion was sharp and loud, a crack of white light, and a pressure wave that scattered the nearest drones like dry leaves in a storm. In the confusion, Ji-un fired. 3 rounds. Each one hit the hive leader in the central mass. It shuddered, let out a deep vibration that shook the ground, and collapsed. The drones around it went mad. Without the leader's signal, they scattered in every direction, crashing into walls, into each other, into nothing. Some curled up on the ground and stopped moving entirely. Others ran in circles. The hive structure had broken. Ji-un's team did not wait. They moved towards Sector 6. On the southern side, Taeho's team was in trouble. The corridor they had planned to use was blocked. The Drawl had filled it with a wall of hardened secretion, a resin-like substance they used to build their hive structures. It was thick and solid. There was no way through without making noise. Taeho looked at Private ONG, a combat engineer who carried enough breaching charges to open a bank vault. NG studied the wall, placed 2 small shaped charges at key stress points, and stepped back. "This is going to be loud," she said. Taeho smiled. "Then we better be fast." The charges blew. The wall cracked apart in a shower of black fragments. The sound echoed across the entire sector. Within seconds, drones were pouring toward the noise from every direction. Taeho's team pushed through the breach and ran. Corporal An Sunwoo fired behind them as they moved, dropping drones with precise bursts that punched through their shells and sent them tumbling. Taeho did not fire. His hands were full. He was carrying a trauma bag in one hand and a sidearm in the other, ready for either job. They found the hive leader in a wide-open space that had once been a vehicle bay. It was enormous, the largest one yet, and it was surrounded by a ring of drones that stood perfectly still, like soldiers at attention. The vibrations coming from it were deep and constant, a low hum that made Taeho's teeth ache. Eunji planted her last breaching charge on a support column above the leader, and detonated it. The column cracked, and a section of ceiling fell directly onto the creature. It screamed, not with a voice, but with a vibration so intense that every human in the area felt it in their bones. The drones surged forward. Sunwoo opened fire. Taeho drew his sidearm and joined him. Eunji grabbed a fallen piece of rebar and swung it at a drone that got too close, cracking its shell open with a single blow. The hive leader died under the rubble. The drones scattered. Above it all, Soren lay on the communications tower with her rifle pressed against her shoulder. The night vision scope turned the world into a bright green landscape. She could see everything: the swarm, the teams, the hive leaders. She found her first target, a hive leader moving between sectors, trying to reorganize the drones that had lost their commanders. It was over 2 kilometers away, a long shot, even by her standards. She adjusted for wind, temperature, and the lower gravity. She slowed her breathing until her heartbeat was a soft, distant drum. Then she fired. The round crossed the distance in less than 2 seconds. It struck the hive leader in the upper body and punched clean through. The drones around it froze, then broke apart. Soren shifted her scope and found the next one. In the center, Doyeon's team hit the final hive leader head-on. It was the biggest of them all, buried in a nest of drones at the base of the outpost's main wall. They fought through a wave of drones to reach it. Close quarters, brutal, loud. Doyeon fired until his magazine was empty, reloaded in 2 seconds, and fired again. Private Lee Nari fought beside him, with a shotgun that turned drones into fragments at close range. Corporal Kang Daewon used his body as a shield more than once, taking hits from claws that scraped across his armor and left deep gouges in the plating. When they reached the hive leader, Doyeon pulled a thermite charge from his vest, armed it, and threw it directly into the creature's open mouth. The charge burned at over 2,000 degrees. The hive leader did not even have time to vibrate. Silence. Not complete silence. There were still drones moving in the distance, still the sound of wind and settling debris, but the deep, constant hum that had filled the air since the siege began was gone. The hive leaders were dead. All 5 of them. The swarm was broken. Doyen pressed his radio. All teams report. One by one, the voices came in. Jiun, Taeho, Soren. Everyone accounted for. 3 wounded. Daewon had a deep cut on his forearm. Sunwoo had cracked 2 ribs, and Hajin had taken a claw strike across the thigh. But all were alive. All were standing. Doyen looked up at the sky. The smoke was beginning to thin. Somewhere behind it, he thought he could see the faint light of distant stars. "Let us go home," he said. They walked back to the outpost as the first light of dawn touched the horizon. The transport ship broke through the atmosphere of Velris like a burning stone. The sky above the outpost was thick with smoke and the dull orange glow of distant fires. From the command deck, Commander Yuna watched the ship descend and felt something she had not felt in 2 days. A small, fragile piece of hope. It died quickly when she remembered it was only 12 soldiers. The ship landed on the last functioning pad inside the outpost walls. The ground crew, 3 Vessi technicians, and a Menok engineer stood at a safe distance and watched the rear hatch open. Steam hissed from the ship's cooling vents. For a moment, there was only shadow inside the hold. Then the humans stepped out. The first thing the ground crew noticed was the weight. Each human footstep hit the landing pad with a heavy thud, like a drummer striking a deep drum. The gravity on Velris was 0.6 g, barely more than half of Earth's standard. To the humans, it felt like walking on a soft mattress. To the aliens watching, the humans moved like they were made of iron. Captain Han Doyun came down the ramp first. He was not the tallest of the group, but he carried himself like a man who had walked through fire, and decided it was not that bad. His armor was a dark matte gray, scarred and scratched from use. He wore no helmet. His dark eyes swept across the landing area, the walls, the smoke-filled sky, and he nodded once, as if confirming something he already expected. Behind him came the rest. Sergeant Park Ji-eun walked with a rifle across her chest, and a calm expression that made her look like she was arriving at a routine training exercise. Medic Kwon Taeho had a heavy medical pack on his back, and was already looking around at the alien ground crew with open curiosity, the way a person might look at animals in a park. Sniper Bae Soren stepped off the ramp last. She said nothing. She looked at the horizon, squinted slightly, and then looked away. The Menok engineer, a stocky creature with thick gray plates covering its body, stared at the humans and took a step back. It could feel the vibrations through the ground, the weight of each footstep, the dense mass of their bodies. These creatures were heavy, dangerously heavy. Yuna arrived on the landing pad a few minutes later, flanked by Polek and 2 Vessi guards who looked more nervous than protective. She stopped a few meters from Doyun and looked up at him. She was barely half his height. "Captain Han," she said in careful Union Common, "I am Commander Yuna. Thank you for answering our call." Doyun gave a short bow, a gesture that confused the aliens, but was simply habit for him. "Commander, what is your situation?" Yuna led them to the command deck as she explained. The Drawl had taken the entire outer ring of the outpost. The shield grid was failing. They had lost contact with the lower levels. Over 300 civilians were sheltering in the central block, but food and water would run out within a day. The Drawl had not breached the inner walls yet, but they were digging, always digging. Doyun listened without interrupting. When they reached the command deck, he looked at the tactical display, a holographic map showing red clusters of Drawls surrounding the outpost like a tightening fist, and said, "Show me the air composition outside." Pollack pulled up the data. The atmosphere on Velris was a thin mix of nitrogen and carbon dioxide, with trace amounts of methane. To most Union species, it was breathable with light filtration. To humans, it was not. But Doyen looked at the readings and shrugged. "We can manage with rebreathers for short periods," he said. "The oxygen mix is low, but survivable for about 40 minutes without support. We will rotate." Yuna stared at him. "You would go outside without full environmental suits?" "Suits slow us down," Ji-Yoon said from behind Doyen. She was already studying the tactical map, tracing possible routes with her finger. "We will take rebreathers and go light." Yuna did not know what to say to that. On her world, going outside without full environmental protection was considered suicidal. These humans talked about it like skipping an umbrella in light rain. Over the next hour, the humans set up in the outpost's small security wing. They unpacked their gear, checked their weapons, and began modifying their equipment for the local conditions. The outpost staff watched from a distance, fascinated and unsettled in equal measure. Taeho approached a group of injured Vessi in the medical bay. 3 of them had burns from a drawl acid spray. Their thin skin was blistered and weeping. The outpost medic, a nervous Ulari who floated rather than walked, had done what it could, but Vessi biology was not its specialty. Taeho knelt beside the first patient, a young Vessi female barely older than a child, and examined her wounds. His hands were large compared to her arm, but he moved with a gentleness that surprised everyone watching. He cleaned the wound, applied a field dressing, and spoke to her softly the entire time, even though she could not understand a word of Korean. She stopped trembling after a few minutes. There was something about his voice, warm, steady, unhurried, that made pain feel a little less sharp. Meanwhile, Soren had found the highest point in the outpost, a communications tower on the roof of the central block. She climbed it without safety equipment, hauling her long rifle on her back, and settled into a prone position at the top. From there, she could see the entire outer ring. She pulled out a small scope and began scanning. The drawl were everywhere, thousands of them, dark, segmented bodies moving in waves across the broken ground. They had no eyes, no faces, just hard black shells and sharp limbs that clicked and scraped against rock and metal. They moved in patterns, directed by larger variants that stood taller than the rest. Hive leaders. Soren counted them. 1, 2, 3. She marked each position in her mind, like pins on a map. Back in the command deck, Doyen stood in front of the tactical display, with Jian beside him. He pointed at 5 locations on the map. "These are the hive leaders," he said. "We take them out, and the swarm loses coordination." Yuna looked at the map. The hive leaders were deep inside drawl-held territory, surrounded by thousands of drones. "Captain, those positions are unreachable. The drawl density in those areas is high," Doyen finished. "Yes, we noticed." His expression was not arrogant. It was not reckless. It was simply certain, the way someone might be certain that the sun would rise in the morning. "Commander, I want to be honest with you. We are 12 soldiers. We cannot hold this outpost forever. But we do not need to. We just need one night." Yuna's wide dark eyes blinked. "One night?" "The drawl communicate through ground vibrations," Doyun said. "They are strongest when they can feel each other. At night, the surface temperature on Velris drops significantly. The ground contracts. Vibrations travel differently. Their coordination will weaken." He paused. "That is when we go." Yuna looked at Pollack. Pollack looked at his console. Neither of them could find a flaw in the logic, but neither of them could believe what they were hearing, either. 12 beings were planning to walk into a swarm of 10,000 in the dark, on a planet that was not their own, breathing air that could kill them. Doyun saw the doubt in her face. He did not blame her. "We are from Earth, Commander," he said simply. "The dark does not scare us. We were born in it." He turned back to the map and began planning the assault. Ji-Yoon stood beside him, marking routes. Somewhere above them, on top of the tower, Soren watched the swarm and waited. In the medical bay, Tejo finished treating the last patient and began preparing trauma kits. Night was coming, and so were they. The Union Council chamber was a vast circular hall floating in the center of Station Orf, the political heart of the Galactic Union. Representatives from over 200 species sat in tiered rings around a glowing central platform, their forms ranging from towering crystalline beings to small furry creatures no larger than a house cat. The chamber hummed with dozens of overlapping translation frequencies, as every species listened in their own language. On the central platform stood High Delegate Maris, a taurine elder with silver-blue skin and 4 long arms that moved when he spoke, as if conducting invisible music. He had held the position for 30 standard years and had seen many crises. But even he seemed uneasy today. "We have received a formal request for emergency military aid from Outpost Velris," Maris said. His voice was low and smooth. "Commander Yuna reports a full-scale Drawl incursion. The swarm has taken the outer perimeter and is advancing on the main facility. She estimates total overrun within 48 standard hours." The chamber was silent for a moment. Then the murmuring began. The Menok delegate, a squat creature with armored plates across its body, leaned forward. "Velris is a research station. It holds no strategic value. Why should we risk ships and soldiers for a single outpost?" "Because there are over 300 living beings inside that outpost," Maris replied. "Scientists, engineers, diplomats, children." "That is regrettable," said the Yulari representative, a being made almost entirely of light that pulsed as it spoke. "But the Drawl cannot be stopped by conventional forces. Any fleet we send will suffer massive losses. Our military advisors have run the numbers." Maris folded 2 of his arms behind his back. "So no one will go longer this time." Then a small voice came from the far upper ring of the chamber. "Earth has answered the call." Every head, eye, and sensor in the room turned. The speaker was a minor administrative aide, a small Vessi, like Yuna, who managed Earth's file in the Union Registry. He looked terrified to be speaking in front of the full council, but he continued. "Earth has dispatched a team of 12 soldiers aboard a fast-class transport. They will arrive at Velris within 19 standard hours." The Menok delegate made a sound that could only be described as a snort. 12? Against a Drawl swarm? Is this a joke? "Earth is a Class 12 world," Maris said slowly. He unfolded his arms and looked across the chamber. "How many of you have actually read the file?" Most had not. Earth was a footnote, a minor species from a dangerous planet, admitted to the Union more as an experiment than anything else. Their files sat in the registry beside hundreds of others, mostly unread. Maris gestured, and a holographic display appeared above the platform. It showed a rotating image of Earth, blue oceans, green land masses, white clouds, beautiful by most standards. Then the data began scrolling beside it. Surface gravity, 1.0 g, nearly double the Union average. Atmospheric oxygen, 21%, classified as a combustion risk. Average surface temperature range, -89 to +57 degrees Celsius. Active tectonic plates? Yes. Active volcanism? Yes. Predatory megafauna? Yes. Extreme weather events, hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, blizzards, wildfires. Dominant species classification, endurance predator, omnivore, apex. The chamber had grown very quiet. Maris continued reading from the file. Humans evolved on open plains, where they hunted prey by chasing it until it collapsed from exhaustion. Their bodies can operate in extreme heat and extreme cold. They heal from broken bones. They can survive the loss of limbs, organs, and massive amounts of blood. They have binocular forward-facing vision, the mark of a predator. And they have developed chemical, kinetic, nuclear, and directed energy weapons entirely on their own. He paused. They also regularly engage in violent conflict with each other, for recreation. The Ulari pulsed a pale shade of yellow, which was their species' equivalent of nausea. And we let them into the Union? They pass the intelligence and cooperation thresholds, Maris said. They are social creatures, highly cooperative within groups. They form bonds quickly and defend those bonds aggressively. He shut down the display. They are coming. 12 of them, whether we approve or not. Back on the transport ship, Captain Han Do-yoon sat in the small briefing room and reviewed the intelligence package the Union had sent. It was thin. The Union did not have much data on the Drawl. Most species ran from them rather than studying them. What he had was this. The Drawl were a hive swarm species. Eyeless. Communicated through ground vibrations. Highly aggressive. They consumed organic and inorganic material alike. Their outer shells were tough, but not impervious to kinetic rounds. Their hive leaders, larger variants that directed the swarm, were the key. Kill the leaders, and the drones became disorganized. Do-yoon closed the file and looked at his team. Sergeant Park Ji-eun sat across from him, sharpening a combat knife with a slow, steady rhythm. She had already memorized the outpost layout. Medic Kwon Tae-ho was reading the medical profiles of the alien species on the outpost, trying to figure out how to treat wounds on bodies that were nothing like human ones. Sniper Bae Soren was sitting in the corner with her eyes closed, breathing slowly. She was doing what she always did before a mission. Going still. The rest of the squad filled the room. 12 soldiers. That was all Earth could send on short notice. The Union probably thought it was a joke. 12 soldiers against a swarm of 10,000. Do-yoon stood and the room went quiet. Here is what we know, he said. A Drawl swarm has taken a research outpost. There are over 300 civilians inside, including non-combatants and children. The Union asked for help, and nobody came. We are the only ones who said yes. He let that sit for a moment. We are not going there to hold a line. We are not going there to wait for more help. There is no more help. We are going there to end this. He tapped the display, and the outpost layout appeared. The Drawl operate on a hive structure. Kill the leaders, and the swarm falls apart. Intelligence says there are at least 5 hive leaders spread across the perimeter. That is our target. Ji-eun looked up from her knife. Rules of engagement? Kill anything with more than 4 legs that tries to eat you, Do-yoon said. Tae-ho grinned. So, just a normal Tuesday. There were a few quiet laughs. Do-yoon allowed it. Humor was how his people handle fear. It was not that they were not afraid. They were. Every single one of them. But humans had learned a long time ago that fear was just another feeling, and feelings could be managed. We land in 14 hours, Do-yoon said. Get some rest. Eat. Check your gear twice. When we hit the ground, we move fast and we move together. He looked at each of them. 12 faces. 12 heartbeats. 12 humans from a planet that the galaxy considered a death trap. They asked for backup, Do-yoon said quietly. Let us show them what backup from Earth looks like. The ship hummed as it cut through the dark between stars. Inside, the humans prepared. Outside, the galaxy waited. And on Velris, the Drawl kept coming. The lights on the command deck flickered again. Commander Yuna pressed her thin webbed fingers against the console and tried to keep her breathing steady. She was not built for war. None of her kind were. The Vessi were diplomats, translators, bridge builders between species. They were small, soft-skinned amphibians with wide dark eyes and voices that could shift between 47 known languages. They solved problems with words, but words could not stop what was coming. Outside the reinforced windows of Outpost Velris, the sky burned orange. Drawl drop pods fell like black rain across the horizon, punching holes into the dry earth, and splitting open to release hundreds of swarming creatures. The Droll were not interested in talking. They never were. They moved like a living flood, dark, sharp-limbed, eyeless things that communicated through vibrations in the ground. They consumed everything: metal, rock, organic matter. They stripped planets bare and moved on. And now they had chosen Velrus. Yuna turned to her communications officer, a tall insect-like creature named Pollock, who sat frozen at his station. His mandibles clicked nervously. "Have we received any response from the Council?" Yuna asked. Pollock shook his narrow head. "3 species have declined. The Terrenes say their fleet is engaged elsewhere. The Yulari claim the distance is too far. The Menok did not respond at all." Yuna closed her eyes. She had sent the distress call 6 standard hours ago. 6 hours. In that time, the Droll had already taken the outer research stations. 42 scientists and engineers were either dead or missing. The outpost shield grid was running at half power. They had enough energy to hold for maybe 2 more days if the Droll did not increase their assault. And the Droll always increased their assault. "Send the call again," Yuna said quietly. "Contact every registered world in the Union." Pollock hesitated. "Commander, that includes the newer entries, worlds that have not yet been evaluated for." "I do not care about evaluations," Yuna said. Her voice was calm but firm. "We are going to die here, Pollock. I will take help from anyone who answers." Pollock turned back to his console and sent the signal. It went out wide, touching every registered frequency in the Galactic Union's network. It reached old allies and new members. It reached trading outposts and research colonies. And somewhere, deep in a quiet arm of the galaxy, it reached a small blue and green planet that most species in the Union had never heard of. Earth. The signal arrived at the United Earth Defense Coordination Center at 3:47 a.m. Seoul time. Most of the building was dark. A night shift officer named No Jeon was sitting at her desk with a cup of cold coffee and a half-finished crossword puzzle when her terminal beeped. She blinked at the screen, read the message twice, and then picked up the phone. Within 20 minutes, the message had reached General Baekwon-jin, who read it from his bed with his reading glasses on. He was 61 years old, a man built like a stone wall, with a voice that could fill a room without ever raising above a conversational tone. He had spent 30 years in the military, and another 5 navigating the confusing politics of Earth's new relationship with the Galactic Union. Humanity had only been a registered member for 2 years. They had been invited mostly as a curiosity, a Class 12 Death World species. The Union had over 400 member worlds, and Earth was the only one rated above Class 9. Most species in the Union came from gentle worlds, stable climates, low gravity, mild atmospheres. Earth, by their standards, was a nightmare. A planet of crushing gravity, extreme weather, volcanic activity, predatory wildlife, and an atmosphere so oxygen-rich it was practically flammable. The Union had accepted Earth the way someone might accept a stray dog into their home, carefully, and from a safe distance. General Beck read the distress call one more time. A besieged outpost, a sworn species. No other member world willing to respond. He set his glasses on the nightstand and made 2 calls. The first was to the Ministry of Defense. The second was to Captain Han Doyun. Doyun was awake, which was not surprising. He rarely slept more than 4 hours. He was in the base gym, running on a treadmill at an incline that would make most people pass out, when his phone buzzed. He slowed the machine, wiped his face with a towel, and answered. "Captain Han," General Beck said. "How fast can you get your team ready?" Doyun did not ask why. He did not ask where. He checked his watch and said, "Give me 90 minutes. You have 60. Doyun hung up and started making calls of his own. Sergeant Park Ji-yeon was cleaning her rifle in the barracks when she got the message. She had a calm face and steady hands and a reputation for never missing a shot at any distance under 300 meters. She read the briefing, nodded once, and began packing her gear. Medic Quantejo was eating cold noodles in the mess hall. He was the kind of man who smiled too much for someone who had seen the things he had seen. He had served in 3 combat zones on Earth before volunteering for the off-world program. When his phone buzzed, he read the message, shoved one last bite into his mouth, and stood up. Sniper Bae Sorin was lying on her bunk, staring at the ceiling. She was quiet, always had been. She did not talk much, did not socialize much, and could hold perfectly still for 11 hours straight without shifting her weight. When her phone buzzed, she simply sat up, pulled her boots on, and left the room without a word. Within 55 minutes, the squad was assembled in the hangar. 12 humans in total, armed, armored, and ready. They boarded the transport ship, a fast-class vessel the Union had lent to Earth as a welcome gift, and launched into the dark. Back on Velris, the ground shook as another section of the outer wall collapsed. Yuna stood in the command deck and stared at the tactical display. Red dots were everywhere. The Drawl were closing in. Pollak spoke up from behind her. "Commander, we received one response to the distress call." Yuna turned. "From whom?" Pollak's mandibles clicked again, but this time it was not from fear. It was confusion. "A planet called Earth. They are sending a squad of 12 soldiers." Yuna stared at him. 12? "Yes, Commander." She turned back to the display and said nothing. 12 soldiers against 10,000 Drawl. She did not know whether to laugh or cry, but it did not matter. Help was help, even if it was only 12. She just had to survive long enough for them to arrive. Dawn came slowly to Velris. The sky shifted from black to a deep, bruised purple, then to a pale gray as the distant sun climbed above the horizon. The fires from the outer ring had burned themselves out during the night, leaving behind twisted metal skeletons and the faint smell of chemical smoke. The wind was still. The ground was quiet. For the first time in 3 days, there was no hum. Commander Yuna stood at the observation window on the command deck and stared at the scene outside. She had not slept. She had stood in that same spot for most of the night, watching the tactical display as the red dots, the Drawl signatures, had flickered and gone dark, one by one. She had listened to the distant sounds of gunfire and explosions, and had gripped the edge of the console so hard that her thin fingers had gone white. And she had waited. Now it was over. The Drawl swarm had collapsed. Without the hive leaders, the drones had lost all coordination. Some had fled into the wasteland beyond the outpost. Some had turned on each other in confusion. Most had simply stopped, frozen in place like broken machines, their bodies curling inward until they became still, dark shapes scattered across the ground like fallen stones. By morning, the swarm that had held the outpost under siege was gone, not defeated in the traditional sense, dismantled, taken apart from the inside like a clock with its gears removed. 12 soldiers had done that. 12 humans, in one night. Yuna still could not quite believe it. She turned from the window when the door opened. Pollak entered, his mandibles clicking with what she had learned to recognize as amazement. "Commander, the humans have returned. All 12 are alive." "Injuries?" Yuna asked. 3 wounded, none critical. Their medic is treating them now." Pollak paused. "Commander, I watched the sensor recordings from last night. I have served in the Union administration for 19 years. I have never seen anything like what those creatures did." "They are not creatures, Pollak," Yuna said quietly. "They are people." She made her way down to the security wing, where the humans had set up their temporary base. What she found there stopped her in the doorway. The humans were laughing. Not all of them, and not loudly, but the sound was unmistakable. Captain Doyun sat on an overturned supply crate, eating something from a silver pouch with a small plastic spoon. Beside him, Sergeant Jiyoon was wrapping a fresh bandage around Corporal Daewon's forearm, while Daewon complained that it was just a scratch and she was wrapping it too tight. Private Hajin was limping slightly, but had refused to sit down, instead helping Private Nari sort ammunition by caliber on a folding table. Corporal Sunwoo was leaning against a wall, with his arms crossed over his cracked ribs, making a joke that Yuna could not understand, but that made Taho laugh so hard he nearly dropped the medical scanner he was holding. And in the far corner, Soren sat alone, cleaning her rifle with slow, careful movements. She did not laugh. She did not speak, but there was something in the way she sat, relaxed, unhurried, steady, that told Yuna the sniper was at peace. They had just fought through a nightmare. They had walked into a swarm of 10,000 alien predators in total darkness on a planet that was not their own, breathing air that was slowly poisoning them, and they had won. And now they were sitting here eating field rations and laughing about sore muscles and making fun of each other's bandages, as if they had just come back from a long hike. Yuna did not understand these beings. She was beginning to think she never would. Doyun noticed her standing in the doorway and stood up. "Commander, good morning." "Good morning, Captain." Yuna stepped inside. She looked around the room, at the faces of the 12 soldiers who had saved her outpost and everyone in it. "I want to thank you, formally, on behalf of Outpost Velris and the 312 people sheltering here. What you did last night was beyond anything we expected, beyond anything we thought possible." Doyun shook his head slightly. "We just did our job, Commander." "Your job," Yuna repeated. She let the words sit in the air for a moment. "Captain, I have spent my career in the Galactic Union. I have worked with dozens of species. I have seen bravery, and I have seen sacrifice. But I have never seen anyone do what your people did last night. You walked into death, and you walked back out." How? Not for long. He was not a man who spent a lot of time thinking about things he already understood. "Where we come from," he said, "things try to kill us every day. The weather, the animals, the water, even our own planet shakes and burns and floods without warning. We grew up learning that the world is dangerous, and that the only way to survive is to face it together." He glanced at his team. "We are not stronger than the Drawl. We are not faster. We do not have armor or claws or hive minds. But we have something else." "What is that?" Yuna asked. "Each other," Doyun said simply. "We fight for the person standing next to us. That is all. That is everything." Yuna looked at him for a long time. Later that day, the Union Council received Yuna's full report. It was transmitted on a priority channel and marked for immediate review. Maris read it in his private chamber, aboard Station Oreth. He read it twice, then a third time, and then sat in silence for a very long while. The report was detailed. It included sensor data, tactical recordings, casualty assessments, and atmospheric readings. It included a full timeline of the human assault, from the moment they left the outpost to the moment they returned. It documented the destruction of all 5 hive leaders, the collapse of the Drawl swarm, and the subsequent retreat of surviving drones off-world. It noted that the humans had suffered 3 non-fatal injuries and 0 fatalities. But it was the final paragraph that Maris read the most carefully. Yuna had written it herself, in her own words, without the formal language of Union diplomacy. It read, "I asked the galaxy for help. The galaxy looked away. Earth answered. They sent 12 soldiers to fight 10,000. I watched those 12 walk into the dark, and I did not expect them to come back. They came back. They came back laughing. I do not pretend to understand humans. I do not know if anyone in the Union truly can. But I will tell you what I know. They are not monsters. They are not mindless weapons. They are people who were forged by a world that should have killed them 1,000 times over. And instead of breaking, they learned to protect each other. I recommend that the Council reassess its classification of Earth. They are not just a Deathworld species. They are something else entirely. I do not have a word for it in Union Common, but in their language, I believe it translates to allies. Do not send more backup. They were enough. And in the name of everything this Union holds sacred, never, ever make enemies of Earth. Maris set the report down. He leaned back in his chair and looked out the wide viewport at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there on a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow sun, 7 billion more of those beings were going about their day. Eating, sleeping, building, fighting, laughing, surviving. 7 billion more humans on a world that burned and froze and shook and flooded. And they did not run. They did not hide. They stayed. They adapted. They endured. And now the galaxy knew they were here. Maris picked up his communicator and connected to the Council's central channel. "This is High Delegate Maris," he said. "I am calling an emergency session regarding the reclassification of Earth and the formal integration of human military forces into the Union's defense framework." There was a pause on the line. Then a voice. "Delegate, is this based on the Velris report?" "Yes," Maris said. "What classification do you propose for Earth?" Maris thought about Yuna's report. He thought about 12 soldiers walking into the dark. He thought about a species born on a planet that tried to kill them every single day. And he thought about the fact that they had not only survived, they had thrived. "Reclassify them as permanent strategic allies," Maris said. "Priority 1, and update the registry." "What should the new entries say?" Maris looked at the stars one last time. "Do not provoke. Do not underestimate. Do not forget. They come from a death world, and they are not afraid." He closed the channel. The stars burned on, silent and ancient. And somewhere among them, the humans carried on, doing what they had always done. They survived.